In the world of storytelling, there exists an innumerable number of tropes and clichés, from a villain monologuing when they really should be finishing the job, to a classic chosen one protagonist. Pretty much every story we read, watch, listen to, or even write ourselves uses tropes or clichés in one way or another. They are a storyteller's best friends. When building a narrative, the author and actors begin to meticulously construct a world, an imaginary world, filled with places, characters, and events. But their world is just that, imaginary, one different from our own, separated from it by the fourth wall. But what happens when the storytellers and actors decide to bridge the gap and connect both worlds? Well, then we get
Voyez, elle pense qu'à rigoler.
À qui tu parles?
Au spectateur.
one of the audience's favorite tropes is the fourth wall break, the moment when a character acknowledges the fact that they are in a story. This can serve to engage the audience on a deeper level, connecting them to the character and story. In our modern media landscape, breaking the fourth wall is most often associated with films, a moment when the character gazes into the camera and either silently or vocally acknowledges the audience. But the fourth wall is both etymologically and conceptually linked with theater. A theater set is typically made up of 3 walls, 2 to the side and 1 at the back. Therefore, the fourth wall is transparent for the audience, opaque for the performers. Throughout most of history, plays often addressed the audience. In ancient Greece, it was through a chorus which served to help the audience understand the performance. During the Renaissance and beyond, addresses came either through comments directed at the audience, called asides, or through inner monologues spoken aloud, called soliloquies. Ben Jonson with his presenter role, Shakespeare in A Midsummer Night's Dream, or Molière in The Miser. The concept of the fourth wall itself came centuries later. It is most often attributed to French philosopher and writer Denis Diderot, who in 1758 wrote, "Imagine a huge wall across the front of the stage, separating you from the audience, and behave exactly as if the curtain had never risen." As theater moved towards realism, the fourth wall became thicker and more apparent, which now meant that actors who drew attention to it and broke it did so to garner more attention or more interest, quite often for comedic effect. As for cinema, a lot of early film history consisted of documentaries, therefore a fourth wall rarely existed. But fiction films began to break it early into the 20th century. The earliest example I could find was The Great Train Robbery, released in December 1903. The film is, I think you can guess, about a train robbery. Not really a great one though, as the outlaws get caught and killed. The final scene of the film bears the title Realism, and it features an outlaw, played by Justice D. Barnes, who fires his gun directly at the camera. Some other notable examples are Kid Auto Races at Venice in 1914, which is Charlie Chaplin's second ever film. This whole film is just 6 minutes of Chaplin's character, the tramp, standing in front of the camera while the cameramen are trying to film the Junior Vanderbilt Cup, which was an actual race. So Chaplin and director Henry Lerman filmed this in front of real-life spectators, all while cars raced past them. Coney Island in 1917, directed by and starring Roscoe Arbuckle, whose character, called Fatty, addresses the camera directly in one scene, urging the cameraman to lift the frame so the audience doesn't see his private parts. And Buster Keaton's 1 Week, released in 1920, features a scene of a woman taking a bath. She drops the soap, and a mysterious hand appears to block the camera, allowing her to retrieve it. As a side note, 1 Week is an absolutely amazing short silent film, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely should. Both Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton would go on to break the fourth wall much more in the future. But the first feature-length film to do it, or at least the earliest example I could find, is Men Who Have Made Love to Me, from 1918, which is lost. But Apparently, in the original, the protagonist of the film, Mary McLean, played by Mary McLean, would often jump in to address the audience and explain what was going on. But who cares about real humans? They're so fleshy and gross. What we want is 2D animals. Starting in the 1930s, the Looney Tunes quickly began to capture the hearts of everyone with their eccentric cast of characters. As the main cast slowly established itself, a few characters started breaking the fourth wall, most commonly Bugs Bunny. His jokes consisted of him directly talking to the audience or even the narrator of the story, quite often in fact, establishing a close connection with the audience. It's important to note that Bugs and the rest of the cast started off in movie theaters and stayed there for decades before moving to TV. Speaking of TV, the medium tends to use this trope quite often, seeing as TV shows run much longer than films. Fourth wall breaks are used to deepen an audience's connection to the characters and retain their attention for a longer time span. One of the first shows to use this trope, the Jack Benny program, a comedy show wherein Jack Benny and other characters often interacted with the audience, mocked advertisers, and complained about their salaries. The show started on radio in 1932 and on TV in 1950. Other early pioneers include The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, The Twilight Zone, The Yogi Bear Show, Monty Python's Flying Circus, and so on. As I said, TV does this a lot, and there are countless examples, from old sitcoms and cartoons to modern-day dramas like Fleabag and House of Cards. Most of the fourth wall breaks we've covered so far have been for comedic effect. Now it's time to tackle something a bit different. The French New Wave emerged in France in the late 1950s, putting a bigger focus on independent filmmakers who used techniques which purposefully went against the rules set by big studios. These directors and writers focused on intentionally breaking the audience's immersion by creating films which felt self-conscious. These directors wanted you to know that you were watching a film, and intentionally distanced you from the imaginary world of the characters. This achieved the effect of getting people to think about the film, to mull it over and really take in everything they were seeing. Many techniques were used to achieve this: rough jump cuts, unconventional camera angles, and of course, breaking the fourth wall. Jean-Luc Godard is the director most often associated with it, using it in multiple films by having characters look into the camera or outright talk to it. As we move through the rest of the 20th century and into the 21st century, the fourth wall seems to become weaker and weaker as more films start using meta humor. Fight Club, The Wolf of Wall Street, Deadpool, all different flavors of film, using the same technique for different purposes. But what about a media genre that cannot function without breaking the fourth wall? Video games are an interactive form of entertainment. Therefore, pretty much every game needs a tutorial or a UI, which right off the bat distances the players from the in-game world. Then you have video games which go even further by having characters outright acknowledge the fact that they are in a game. Then there are quirks like idle animations and behind-the-scenes content. Some games actually use the characteristics of their medium to their advantage. Metal Gear Solid contains many examples, my favorite of which being the Psycho Mantis section, where the boss toys with you by shaking your controller and reading your memory card, which allows him to predict your movements, forcing you to change the controller port in order to beat him. Or you can just destroy the statues, but that's beside the point. Eternal Darkness features a sanity meter, which, when lowered far enough, prompts the game to start showing houseflies and fake error messages, manipulating the audio, playing random sound effects, fake deaths, and much more. Undertale includes some of the most famous fourth wall breaks in video game history, from characters talking to you and taunting you, to toying with the UI, forcing the game to crash, and even calling you out if you try to alter the game's files. One final form of media I'd like to cover is literature. The best-selling novel of all time, and undoubtedly one of the greatest literary works of all time, Don Quixote, goes to incredible lengths to both immerse the reader and simultaneously unimmerse him. That definitely is not a word. Miguel de Cervantes frequently reminds the reader that what they are reading is in fact not fiction, but a true story, while at the same time having the characters recognize that they are in a story. Cervantes inserts a fictional writer in the story and frequently recognizes him as the true author of the story. Part 2 of the novel starts off with our main cast finding out that they are now part of a famous book. Their subsequent adventures spotlight characters which repeatedly mention the first book and how much they love it or hate it. Fun fact for those who haven't read it, while Cervantes was working on part 2, an anonymous author published a fake sequel. This imposter and his book are mentioned multiple times in the actual sequel, Cervantes mocking both the work and its author. Compared to other forms of literature, comic books utilize meta humor most often, leading to, you know what, characters like Deadpool and She-Hulk have achieved popularity through their frequent use of metafiction tropes. I assume most people don't often associate breaking the fourth wall with literature, but it does happen in all types of books, often in the form of metalepsis, an intentional crossing of the boundaries between narrative worlds. For example, a character stepping into the real world, an author stepping into the story, or the narrator directly interacting with the story. But have you ever felt that fourth wall breaks are becoming more and more common in films and TV shows? If so, then you'd be right. They are more common. With the rise of meta humor, writers have begun relying on this trope more and more, sometimes to the detriment of the work in question. Meta humor and self-relatability has been on the rise for decades at this point, as audiences continue to become more and more knowledgeable about how the media they consume is made. When Scream made fun of horror movie clichés and the never-ending creation of sequels, it felt like a breath of fresh air after several decades of slasher films following a monotonous formula. The day blockbuster hits like Deadpool have given writers a greater incentive to be more meta. The rise of social media and internet humor, which often focuses on self-referential or self-deprecating jokes, has led the general audience to expecting the same from their entertainment. But is this really a bad thing? Well, not really. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of examples of terrible fourth wall breaks and metafiction. For every Mulholland Drive, there is a Batman and Robin. But, like every single trope that exists out there, it all depends on the writer and how he uses it. The fourth wall is contingent on its writer. How we build it and how we break it are questions of style and skill. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something new you can tell your friends or family. If you liked the video, please like, share, and comment. If you didn't, feel free to dislike and leave your grievances in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe, but no pressure. Have a beautiful day, and hopefully I will see you all in the next video.